should there be a problem, and we can protect all the children. But equally, I'm a thin edge of the wedge. I'm a edge of the wedge guy, and once you start allowing for backdoors and breaches of privacy, then I'm not a big fan.
AI Newsflash! This week's breakthrough could flip the rulebook on its head. Stay tuned.
So UK drops Apple's encryption backdoor demand. So in February, there were reports the government had ordered Apple to create a way for UK security services to access its encrypted user data. Now, the UK government has dropped its demands to create a backdoor into Apple's encryption. According to the US intelligence chief, it would have enabled access to the protected encrypted data of American citizens and encroached on our civil liberties. Lee, what do you think about this? Do you think it's a good thing that the government is not going to get into the back of your iPhone, or not a good thing?
Oh, it's that age-old argument, isn't it? About, if you're not doing anything wrong, then should there be a problem, and, we can protect all the children. But equally, I'm a thin edge of the wedge. I'm a thin edge of the wedge guy, and once you start allowing for backdoors and breaches of privacy, then I'm not a big fan myself. So I think it's probably a good thing that it's been dropped, but you just never know, do you? If you're not doing anything wrong, what are you worried about?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about asking you the question regarding it. And then I imagined a scenario of going, okay, so what if there was some encrypted data on there? So let's say, for example, God forbid, but let's say my son had been kidnapped or something like that, right? And the only way we could find out some of the clues what he'd been up to was on that iPhone, right? Getting into his Apple account, for example, would show his last location, maybe who he'd been chatting to, maybe who might have convinced him to go to X, Y, and Z location. Would that be a good thing?
Obviously, yes, right? I mean, obviously, yes, but it depends who's making the rules and what they're using the rules for, doesn't it? If they were using it to find out who certain journalists' trusted information providers were, then that would not be the right thing to do. So I think it's all about whether you trust the authorities with the power that they have or not. I think that's what ultimately that comes down to.
I would agree.
And I think at the minute, given what's going on, I don't think America trusts the UK hugely. So
no, I don't think we trust them.
That's probably one of the reasons why. And probably likewise back the other way.
I imagine, to me, I think that's the big problem, right? Is government has lost all trust in most of its citizens for things like this due to corruption and bad use of things like this in the past, right? So until they rebuild that trust, which is virtually impossible now, then it's probably a better idea that they can't get into the back doors.
And do you trust them?
Bang their back doors in.
They're not the most competent at running things, are they, government in general?
Exactly that, right?
I'm not picking a colour, by the way. I'm not saying red, blue, yellow, or green or whatever. It's a case of they're all pretty incompetent when it comes to these things. And actually, I don't want them to have it. We only need to look at the GP surgeries and hospital notes and not being able to make them talk to each other to know actually government's probably not the best people to be doing this.
I hear you. And I agree. And I'm thinking, it's a bit weird, really, because we're only in our 20s, so we've not seen many governments come and go, right? But so we're a bit wiser than what we look for our age. But no, having seen red and blue over the years now, then I don't think, like you say, you can trust any government. It's probably more the infrastructure around the government and the processes and the systems around them more than the actual government themselves, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on to the next news story. So I found this one quite interesting. So this was a new report from Make UK. Now, for those that don't know, Make UK is a website that's dedicated to things that are made in the UK and in the essence of promoting stuff that's made in the UK abroad. A site to be proud of that we're promoting things made in the UK. In their report, Sage is calling on the government to provide targeted funding, training and innovation support for SME manufacturers to help close the gap between the UK and its rivals in adapting digitalisation and automation technologies. Because, and this is the reason, right, they say that such backing could add £150 billion to GDP, by 2035. What they're saying is, if we adapt and utilise AI to its full potential and use it to the best of its ability, it could add £150 billion to GBT. Do you believe this, Lee? Do you think it's true?
I'd be interested to know a bit more about where they got the numbers from, but economists are quite good at doing this, and the same thing's been done around workplace mental health, right? That it's estimated to cost 51 billion per year or something, and we've been saying that now for the best part of at least half a decade. Not enough work gets done to close that gap in mental health. So I wonder if it will get done to close it in AI in that way. Economists love to have these figures that create future business opportunities. I rely on one in the mental health industry. So I'm going to go with yes. I think there's 150 billion to be saved in AI adoption, just like there is 51 billion in mental health.
What have you got for us this week, Lee?
Okay, so on a similar sort of perhaps ironic vein, the Mental Health Foundation did a year-long pilot from April 24 to April 25, where they trialled a 32-hour full work week. That was with full pay for full-time staff, and they made appropriate proportional adjustments for part-time employees. And they've actually made it permanent. Now, do you think that this was enjoyed by employees or not? So their working week was reduced. Do you think that would be a positive thing for employees or not?
I would assume it's a positive thing that they'd be delighted with working less hours, no?
Yeah, absolutely they were. Of course they were. 69%.
Okay.
Yes, they all liked it, but there were positive results as well. I'm sounding a bit sarcastic about it, but actually there was 69% reported of less work-related stress. 68% experienced improved mental well-being, 64% reported greater life satisfaction. These are all really quite key metrics when it comes to workplace mental health. Nearly 80% reported a better work-life balance. So that's good. Now, what happened to productivity, though, during this time? Because you might expect that to drop, right? So 55% of staff felt that their productivity increased. Now, this does look like it was self-reporting. So the staff are saying they were more productive as opposed to the company saying they were more productive. That hasn't been reported in quite the same way. I'd really be interested to see that. However, if productivity was hugely down, evidence, I can't imagine they'd have implemented it. So there must be something there that was good. What other gains were there? 55% thought their ability to manage their workload was better. And overall, those with disabilities, long-term conditions, neurodivergence, or those with parenting or caring responsibilities and part-time staff all reported stress reduction, work-life balance, and overall well-being. So it wasn't just some categories of staff that reported this being better. It was all of them. Now, again, shock horror, work less hours, get paid the same, people enjoy it more. I don't think it should be a huge surprise to us.
If we stay in the vein of this show, for example, this is something several episodes that I tried to talk about the other day, right? If you're utilizing AI, I really need to put my teeth in again for this episode. If you're utilizing AI correctly, then let's say, for example, you were a blog writer, you were writing articles for a living, then you could write what would previously have took you at least all day to start the drafts of an article. If nothing else, you can probably get the draft of your article done in 5 minutes. And if all it does is brainstorm that article out for you, so you've got the headlines or the bare bones, the wireframe of it, then that will probably half the time at least that it's going to take you to write the article. And that's only using AI for part of the job, right? So you still take the authentic human writer, he still writes the human side of it, but he's been given a bit of a support mechanism in the brainstorming. Probably one of the most challenging times is to come up with the ideas, right? Yeah. And AI is giving him some ideas
and to weed out which ones are rubbish and filter them down, and all of that really can be done with those tools that much quicker. I think one of the other things the article mentioned, though, Martin, was and this is where companies will save money. So even if productivity was a little bit down, right? So job applications for the organisation nearly doubled. People wanted to work there. Over a quarter of all applicants said that was one of the key reasons. The reduced working week was a key reason to be attracted to that company. But get this one. So intention to leave, which is a very big predictor of whether somebody will leave an organisation or not. The intention to leave dropped from 33% to 15%. So the intention for people to leave nearly halved. So huge cost saving in terms of staff hiring and retention.
Yeah.
And ultimately, and again, this won't be a surprise, 100% of participants wanted the arrangement to continue. And the board did make it permanent, reducing the week to within staff contracts. Key takeaways: staff wellbeing, significant improvements were made in stress, mental health and life satisfaction. Productivity seemed to be better. People felt more included and felt that it was more fair in terms of equity positions, and it helped attract talent and it helped sustain talent.
We should definitely add in and remember that, just like often in the sales team, they talk about it's cheaper to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new customer, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the same with your staff. Now, training time might not be accounted in some businesses. Larger organisations will know how much that's costing them, but also experience within a business. So the longer people stay, the more experience they become within that business, and then you're going to be able to run the best business in a more efficient, more effective way. So we shouldn't forget that retaining staff is also a cost-effective return ROI, right, for the business.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the key things that once an organisation starts having a proactive mental health approach, it's one of the key things that does change the retention and commitment to the organisation.
Cool. Okay.
So that was the first story. The second story is a bit more directly related to AI, in fairness. This one came out of Forbes recently, about building a brain smart company in an AI powered world. Now that sounds very, very complex, doesn't it? But essentially what it's talking about is that in this hybrid world that we're living in, the biggest competitive edge isn't just technology now, but it is the human brain and getting the best out of it. Now, what does the human brain do that AI can't in quite the same way? Creativity, to a degree, adaptability, critical thinking is a big human skills. Yet these are under pressure because of rising rates of depression, anxiety, ADHD and migraines. So companies are, and by the way, early cognitive decline, so Alzheimer's and other things like that we're starting to pick up quicker. So companies are beginning to see looking after the brain as a strategic position as well. So from traditional wellness initiatives, they're generally too siloed and transactional. And so organizations are looking at integrating brain health into every level of organizational system level approach. So strategy, design and culture. Businesses are calling it Wellbeing 5.0. I mean, I don't remember Wellbeing 1. But perhaps well-being, this is the way it's going, right? Brain health at the centre, precision AI support that's involving prevention data and integration into daily work systems. So they're trying to have the AI spot when people may be showing signs of stress, showing signs of anxiety. So almost doing cognitive screening and emotional health checks through the computers. And they're developing certain tools like NeuroTrack, Linus Health and Meritive that can provide good actionable insights whilst apparently maintaining safeguarding privacy. So these are using biomarkers, neurotech and AI risk scores to make suggestions about early intervention and how to build resilience.
Wow.
There's a good ROI on it, 2 to 3 times ROI, and that's the early stage of what's being looked at there. So again, is it just talk or is there actual real action behind this? But organizations perhaps are beginning to realize brain health is a new competitive advantage. So when we've got this AI powered economy, organizations that win will actually be those that are systematically strengthening the cognitive capacity of their people whilst having all these tools around.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that you've possibly seen it, and I think we should talk about it in next week's episode, is the MIT study recently that's just been revealed that shows the cognitive decline of people using ChatGPT. Jimmy Quick from who wrote the book Limitless, he refers to digital dementia, right? And digital dementia being the fact that, say, for example, these days, you're sitting there watching a show and you go, who's that? Where did we see that actor in that last show before? When did we see them? And rather than sitting there thinking it and getting your brain to remember and go, oh, we saw him in that film, didn't we, 2-3 years ago when we went to the cinema, like to your wife?
Yeah.
You go, let me just Google it. And your
Yeah.
brain doesn't have to do any work, right? So it's just like not taking your body to the gym.
You don't have that waking up at 3 a.m. anymore 2 days later going, aha, that's it.
Yeah, you don't have the eureka moments anymore. Just to give one more example of this that we need to be aware of is my missus is currently studying for the theory test, right? The driving theory test. And she's failed it a couple of times. Hopefully she probably doesn't watch my show, right? She sees enough of me without watching this. Like, one of the things I said to her was, you need to find the highway code as a book, because she followed a very similar approach to my son, which is downloading this app, right, which asks you the questions, you answer the questions, and then the questions don't just give you the multi-choice answers, right? And then you're not actually learning anything as you go through the app. All you're learning is that you got it wrong, so because it's multiple choice. So am I getting the right answer?
Are you going to get the question that you remember the answer to?
Yeah, so she wasn't making any notes and she wasn't really learning anything about it. So I prompted her to go and get the highway code as a book, which she did. So she got that.
They still do that, do they? I'm quite impressed they still do it.
Yeah, and it's still the same size. So it's still like this little thin booklet, etc. The pages are glossy in it. Probably going off track now, but pages are glossy and it's really challenging to read, especially without readers these days. Anyway, and then she was practicing her theory test again. I'll get to my point in a minute. And she had a question about when you can use your horn, right? And there was multiple choice about you can never use your horn in a built-up area. You can only use it between this time and this time. And she didn't know the answer. And I was like, well, what's it saying in your highway code book? She said, I don't know. I was like, I went to the back of rather than looking through the book about where's the section on horns, I went to a thing called the index at the back, where it had all the words, right? And I looked at the word horn. Now, it actually took me a minute to get used to it because it was so there's X amount of rules in the highway code. So it said like 156, I think it was. And I was like looking for page 156. There wasn't 156 pages in it, but it was rule 156. So it took me a moment to get used to that. But I wonder, this is my point, in terms of reference to the AI, how many people would understand to flip to the back of a book to look at an index to then go and actually find that segment? I think that's a forgotten skill in its own right.
The equivalent of that is knowing what to ask Google, right? We'd have had to know where to go and look to find the info, whereas now you have to know how to ask to get the info. And I guess that may become the skill that is needed, as opposed to and retaining that knowledge might be the equivalent of remembering half the stuff that's in Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah. Right, moving on to From the Front Line.
You've been listening to Resilient Entrepreneur with Martin Rodgers and Lee Sharp. Snag the download of the week. Subscribe for more AI news, live demos, and mindset wins. Stay resilient, and we'll see you next time.